Investigator Soeko, analyst grade 3 of the Cygnian Corps, maintained its workstation with the precision of a microgravity surgeon. Data slates aligned to the millimeter, cables managed with obsessive neatness, surfaces antiseptically clean. It was an island of serene logic in the turbulent sea that was Precinct 7's Interspecies Crimes Unit. Directly adjacent, however, was the correlating black hole of tidiness, the desk belonging to investigator Dave Miller, human. It was a chaotic landscape of discarded snack wrappers, mostly synth jerky flavor, questionable meat byproduct. Datapad debris displaying alarming fluctuations in Ganymede grub ball betting odds, and the infamous mug declaring 0 days. Since last sarcastic comment, "Morning, Co." Dave's voice, aggressively cheerful for standard cycle start, preceded him. He skillfully navigated the obstacle course between their desks, somehow avoiding tripping over a stray boot or disturbing a precarious stack of cold case files, and deposited a steaming mug onto Soeko's spotless surface. A damp ring immediately marred the perfection. Fresh batch of liquid ambition from Malorgo's sludge pit. He mentioned seeing a four-armed Jalosi trying to sell slightly haunted power converters down by Docking Bay Epsilon. Said the guy looked twitchier than a Rigelian sandflea on caffeine, Soko. Initiated an immediate scan of the offered beverage. Designation: caffeinated stimulant, Terran style, coffee. Analysis: contains 112% recommended daily intake of bitterness, trace elements suggesting filter neglect, possible butterscotch ripple flavor contamination. Probability of enhancing cognitive function, 6.7%. Probability of causing internal plating discoloration, 22.3%. Informant Malorgo's reliability index remains suboptimal at 39.1%. Haunted power converters are not within our current investigative purview. Details. Dave waved a hand dismissively, taking a large swig from his own mug. It's about keeping ears open. You stick to your algorithms, I'll handle the talking to weirdos part. Works out mostly. He winked, a facial contortion Soko still found vaguely unsettling. Soko internally reviewed Dave's file again. Transferred from the chaotic dockside. Precinct 12 3 rotations ago, trailing a reputation for closing impossible cases through methods best described as making it up as he went along. His arrival had been jarring. The initial partnership briefing involved Dave bypassing standard Cygnian data slate greetings in favor of slapping Soko firmly on the carapace, an act of physical familiarity that had triggered Soko's threat assessment subroutines. Since then, Soeko had allocated significant processing power simply to anticipating Dave's next deviation from protocol, his reliance on gut feelings, and his baffling network of informants ranging from disgruntled cleaning bots to black market snack vendors. Their current case was typical. Soeko had spent cycles meticulously tracing encrypted data trails related to illegal Xylosian dreamweavers, identifying Warehouse 7G on cargo level Gamma as a high-probability Krask syndicate hub through complex network analysis. Dave had achieved the same result by sharing a suspiciously greasy synth sausage with a sanitation bot named Scrubby, Unit 734, who communicated primarily through mournful beeps and by strategically leaking cleaning fluid near known syndicate loiter zones. Unit 734's heuristic programming is designed for waste disposal, not reliable intelligence gathering, Soeko pointed out, displaying Scrubby's less-than-stellar performance reviews. Its identification of shifty dudes lacks quantifiable metrics. Yeah, but Scrubby's got pessimism down to an art form, Dave countered, checking the seals on his slightly scuffed body armor. If he thought they looked shifty, they were probably plotting galactic domination. Besides, your fancy math points, the same way. Let's go poke the Krask hornet's nest before they move the merchandise. Cargo level Gamma lived up to its reputation. It smelled like burnt circuits, desperation, and something vaguely fungal that defied spectral analysis. Pipes leaked ominous fluids, lights flickered threateningly, and the ambient noise was a low thrum occasionally punctuated by the distant, mournful screech of aging machinery. Soeko moved like a phantom, sensors drinking in data, calculating. Threat vectors. Dave followed, boots echoing slightly, occasionally whistling tunelessly and startling a cluster of luminescent space rats. "Getting that prickly feeling again, Co," Dave said, peering down a side corridor filled with barrels ominously labeled "Contents, Mostly Regret." "Like when my old landlady was about to raise the rent. You sensing anything besides bad vibes and questionable plumbing?" "Negative," Soeko replied, voice modulated to a low frequency. "Atmospheric composition consistent with registered industrial byproduct emissions. No anomalous energy signatures detected beyond standard station infrastructure bleed. Probability of encountering organized resistance prior to target location, 28.4%. Only 28%. Something's definitely wrong then," Dave muttered, adjusting the grip on his pulse pistol. Warehouse 7G was ahead, a monolithic block of stained duracrete. It was unnervingly quiet, the usual industrial hum conspicuously absent. The main blast, Doubter, was sealed tight, but a nearby maintenance hatch stood slightly ajar, revealing darkness within. "Unauthorized access point detected," Soeko observed, deploying a stealth microdrone. "Suggests prepared positions or recent activity. Drone commencing internal sweep." The drone's feed appeared on Soko's wrist display, crates stacked like a defensive maze, faint residual heat signatures clustered near the center. No movement, no sound, but the drone's own micro-thrusters. Drone indicates interior clear of immediate threats, though thermal residuals suggest recent presence. Ambush probability elevated to 41.7%. Recommend cautious entry. "Cautious is my middle name," Dave lied cheerfully, nodding towards the hatch. "After you, Tin Man." Soeko calculated the statistical irrelevance of the nickname before slipping through the hatch. The moment Dave followed, the warehouse erupted. Laser fire, pulse bolts, even a few slug thrower rounds ripped through the air from multiple concealed positions. The faint heat signatures had clearly been bait, masking cloaked firing points. Ambush probability recalculated to 100%. "Soeko," snapped, shields flaring as it dove behind a stack of what appeared to be petrified space fruit crates. "Multiple hostiles. Confirmed Krask Syndicate loadout. Thermal cloaking utilized. They anticipated our entry vector." "Son of a Glorgon," Dave yelled, yanking Soko further into cover as a plasma blast vaporized their previous position. "Someone tipped him off. Check the precinct comms." Soko was already ahead, processors slicing through encrypted logs with cold fury. Access logs, security overrides, case file XW773. Accessed 1.4 standard hours ago by Chief Valerius. Justification, personnel performance review. Cross-referencing Valerius's outgoing comms. Encrypted data burst to known Krask Syndicate. Frequency 1.1 hours ago. Circumstantial evidence probability converting to certainty at 99.98%. Confirmed, Soko stated, the word clipped precise, yet conveying universes of betrayal. Compromise origin, Chief Valerius. The change in Dave was instantaneous. The slightly goofy, rule-bending cop vanished. His eyes narrowed, his jaw set, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. "Valerius? That fat, bribe-guzzling furball. I knew his toupee looked suspicious." He popped up, fired a suppressing burst that sent Syndicate thugs scrambling, then ducked back down. "All right, Co, forget procedure, forget backup. Plan B, maximum chaos." The mercenaries were pros, advancing steadily, laying down coordinated fire, trying to flank them. Soeko analyzed firing lanes, shield depletion rates, structural integrity of nearby crates. Survival probability, 3.9%, and falling fast. Investigator. "Miller," Soko began, initiating protocols for secure data erasure upon capture. "Logically, resistance is futile against these odds. Tactical surrender provides the highest probability of—" "Surrender," Dave interrupted with a bark of laughter that held no humor. He risked a glance at Soko, not seeing an analytical partner but something else. "Listen up, you magnificent metal nerd. You might think I'm just some loudmouth ape who spills coffee, but nobody, and I mean nobody, screws with my partner," and then he launched himself over the crates. No plan, no finesse, just pure, distilled human fury. He didn't shoot accurately. He sprayed pulse fire wildly, forcing heads down. He drop-kicked a wheeled toolbox into the path of one merc, sending the alien sprawling. He threw his now empty coffee mug, where had he been keeping it, with surprising force, hitting another merc square in the optical sensor. Then, bellowing something incoherent about Valerius's parentage and questionable hygiene, he charged the nearest syndicate thug, brandishing a hefty spanner he'd apparently conjured from nowhere. The disciplined mercenaries faltered. Their training hadn't covered enraged human-wielding improvised plumbing tools. They were expecting tactics, cover fire, maybe a strategic retreat. They weren't expecting this. Soeko's processors, momentarily overloaded by the sheer illogical spectacle, rebooted with startling clarity. Variables, unpredictable. Threat assessment, chaotic good. Tactical opportunity, exploitable. Ignoring energy conservation, Soeko unleashed targeted hell. A precise shot severed the power conduit feeding the mercenaries' portable shield generator. Another brought down a section of unstable ventilation, ducting directly onto two more thugs. A third ricocheted perfectly, disabling the weapon arm of the merc trying to draw a bead on Dave's reckless charge. The mercenary facing Dave swung a vibro knife, but Dave, anticipating poorly due to sheer momentum, simply crashed into him, the spanner connecting with a dull thud against armored plating. They both went down in a tangle of limbs and curses, one Terran, one guttural syndicate dialect. Silence descended, thick with floating dust motes and the acrid smell of burnt circuitry. Faint groans emanated from various points in the warehouse. Dave disentangled himself from the groaning mercenary, retrieved his spanner, and gave the thug a final, unnecessary poke. He grinned, breathing heavily, looking utterly feral and immensely pleased with himself. Rule number 1, Co. Never bring a Y. Blaster to a spanner fight if the guy with the spanner is sufficiently ticked off. Soeko surveyed the improbable scene. Hostiles neutralized. 7. Partner status. Scuffed but operational. Own status. Nominal. Survival probability. 100%. Conclusion. Human emotional responses, specifically protective loyalty manifesting as temporary tactical insanity, could drastically alter conflict outcomes in ways standard probability models failed to predict. Your intervention, Soko stated carefully, while demonstrating a flagrant disregard for multiple operational safety protocols and utilizing unconventional weaponry, proved decisive. Dave laughed, wiping grime from his face. That's partner. Talk for nice job, Dave. Now let's wrap these bozos up and figure out how to introduce Chief Valerius to the concept of internal affairs, human style. He rummaged in a pocket and pulled out a slightly crushed protein bar labeled flavor. Probably brown. Energy bar? You processed a lot of data back there. Might need refueling. Soeko considered the bar. Calculated nutritional value. Marginal. Estimated risk of adhering unpleasantly to internal mechanisms. 33.7%. Assessed value of reinforcing the demonstrably effective, if bafflingly illogical, partner bond. Immeasurable by current metrics, but trending significantly positive. Affirmative, Investigator Miller, Soko replied, accepting the offering. Logic had its place. But sometimes, surviving the chaos required a partner who threw the rulebook, and himself, directly at the enemy. The coffee, perhaps, was merely a delivery system for something far more unpredictable. Enjoy next story. Avaris tried to look calm as her students entered the classroom and took their seats. It wasn't often that one would have the chance to teach their class about a newly discovered species, and after yesterday's lesson on human physiology, she had managed to prepare a rather special surprise for today's lesson. Once everyone had taken their seats, she stood up and got the attention of the class. Welcome, everyone. Today we'll be continuing with the second lesson on the newly discovered humans. As I hope you remember, last time we primarily covered the humans themselves, physiology, stuff like that. Today we'll be learning about the humans as a people, and the best way to do that is to look at their homeworld, Earth. Avaris tapped her datapad, and an image of a blue-green planet showed up on the screen behind her, accompanied by the standard data points about any planet. Some of you may have heard that Earth is just another word for dirt, leading to the occasional nickname Dirtlings. But that's not quite right. Dirt is just lifeless matter. Earth, in the human languages, means soil, the foundation of life itself. This importance they place upon life and nature can be seen all over the human worlds, and Earth most of all. She tapped the datapad again, and the image changed to show a large predator with spotted fur in an enclosure. This is a leopard, one of the many large predator species native to Earth. Most would, of course, keep such dangerous creatures in enclosures forever, never again letting them be a threat to the people. Avaris was silent for a few moments, letting the implication sink in before continuing. But in this regard, humans are not like most others. The image on the screen changed to a sole herbivore out in the wild. Suddenly, a leopard appeared from nearby bushes and ran at it with terrifying speed, killing it with a bite to the neck before dragging it up into a tree. The class sat in a silent shock before Silthar, Avir, and I spoke up. These leopards, they aren't dangerous to humans, are they? They typically don't hunt humans, but if threatened, they can and will kill humans. There was once even a leopard that did hunt humans due to outside influences and ended up killing at least 125 of them. That particular leopard was hunted down and killed, but not the species as a whole. All the students looked at each other, nervously. The very thought that any intelligent species would allow such dangerous predators to roam around in the wild was horrifying. Why would anyone let such dangerous creatures roam free? Erixis shouted, "Do they just not care about the lives of others?" Avaris gestured for the class to calm down as she spoke. "Oh, they do care. Quite a lot, actually. And not just their own, but everyone's. This includes the animals, even those that could be dangerous to them." The image on the screen changed yet again, this time to another leopard in an enclosure. This is a subspecies of leopard called an Amur leopard. Right now, the humans classify this subspecies as critically endangered, meaning they are almost extinct, and that every measure must be taken to not just preserve the ones that are still alive, but also to bring the entire subspecies back from the brink. To not drive such a species to extinction was one thing, but to actively combat their extinction? The classroom practically erupted as a flood of questions arose. All the students were talking over each other to ask why, when suddenly, an unfamiliar voice cut through the chaos. Well, unfamiliar to the students at least. Because life, in all its forms, is precious. The voice came from the doorway as a human walked in. The class immediately fell silent as Avaris couldn't help but chuckle. "Everyone, I would like you to meet our guest for today, Dr. Maria Vasquez. After all, who better to help me answer your questions about humans than a human?" Once, the first few students had gotten over the shock, the questions started. Nixon was the first to speak up. But why? Wouldn't driving such dangerous creatures to extinction save the lives of many humans who would, at some point in the future, be killed by one of them? He asked. Maria smiled warmly as she responded. Probably, yes. But it can also be argued that you Nalveth could kill humans in the future, so is that really enough of a reason? Nixon simply sat in a stunned silence as Zikara, a Xeric, spoke up to defend her friend. That's different. Nalveth are an intelligent and sapient species, not animals. That's true, Maria said, but are intelligence and sapience the only relevant metrics here? Something doesn't need to be intelligent or sapient to be important. Maria looked toward Avaris and gestured toward the datapad. May I? Avaris handed it over with a nod. A few quick taps and a map of Earth appeared on the display. Human planets have places we call natural parks, areas where human settlement is minimized and nature is preserved as much as possible. The map zoomed in on a particular area. This one is called Yellowstone Natural Park. Images appeared: dry grasslands, sparse trees, sluggish rivers, unremarkable landscapes. The students exchanged uncertain glances. That's it? Someone near the back muttered. That doesn't look like something worth preserving. These are older images, Maria continued. You see, long before they were taken, this region was home to a predator species called wolves. They were a threat to our livestock and at times even to us. Because of this, they were hunted until they were all gone or driven off. Several students nodded, seemingly satisfied. As expected, said Zikor, a Thalari. Logical. Remove the threat, stabilize the environment. Maria smiled faintly. That's what we thought too. But wolves didn't only hunt livestock. They also hunted elk. She gestured to an image of an elk grazing placidly. With their main predator gone, their population exploded. They ate so much vegetation that many plant species almost disappeared. Animals who depended on those plants either starved or left. What followed was a collapse of the ecosystem. We call this a trophic cascade. A low murmur spread through the classroom. One student frowned deeply. But they're herbivores, muttered Krinar. Harmless. And yet they caused devastation, Maria replied. Sometimes it's not just about danger, it's about balance. Some of the students looked unconvinced. Avaris caught one of them whispering, they're over-dramatizing. Surely the effect wasn't that extreme. Shortly after those images were taken, Maria went on, we reintroduced a small number of wolves. They didn't decimate the elk population right away, but the elk learnt quickly. They avoided areas where they were most vulnerable, especially valleys and gorges. And that changed everything. The images shifted to the same valleys, now thick with green, lush and vibrant. The transformation was undeniable. That's not even the same place, one student whispered, wide-eyed. Maria nodded. Bear Valley sides turned into forests. Birds returned. The number of beavers increased. They eat trees, and they build dams. Those dams created habitats for even more species. Another tap. Beavers, then their dams, then ecosystems bursting to life. The wolves also kept coyotes in check. That let rabbit and mouse populations recover, which meant more hawks, foxes, weasels, and badgers. But predators increased life, whispered Silthar, more to himself than to anyone else. Maria gave a soft chuckle. Yes, but most incredible of all was the effect on the rivers. That got the class's attention. There were a few skeptical snorts, though none spoke them aloud. They began to meander less. There was less erosion and more pools formed, more riffle sections, more habitats for even more animals. Impossible, scoffed Zakara. Predators. Can't change rivers, that's absurd. Maria chuckled softly as she tapped to show a sequence of images. Slow transitions of winding muddy streams evolving into structured, fertile waterways. They didn't do it directly, but the vegetation that grew back stabilized the riverbanks, so they collapsed less often. The vegetation also reduced soil erosion, which meant that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Avaris had never seen this class this quiet before. There was barely even any movement. She couldn't blame them, though. When Maria first discussed this with her, it had left her similarly in awe. Just like it did now, the conquering of nature wasn't anything special. A species bending it to their will was nothing new. It may be rare and it hadn't yet been done on a planetary scale, but even terraforming wasn't completely unheard of. But this was something altogether different. These humans, they didn't need to conquer or subdue nature. They didn't need to bend it to their will. They could wield it. Avaris watched the students closely. She could see it, their eyes darting to one another, mentally testing the story against everything they knew. And this was all caused just by bringing back a few predators? Asked Erixus, his voice small, uncertain. Maria nodded. A handful of wolves. That was all it took to begin healing an entire ecosystem. Even the most skeptical students sat still now. No one laughed, no one scoffed. Maria smiled gently. We didn't always understand this. For a long time, we saw nature as a threat, something to conquer. But over time, we learned that it isn't our enemy. It's something we need to listen to. She placed the datapad down and looked across the room. We don't preserve predators in spite of the danger. We preserve them because they belong. Because life, death, prey, predator, They're all part of the same system. And when we work with it instead of against it, well, she gave a wistful smile. Wolves change rivers, Tasmanian devils, heal forests, beavers re-engineer entire landscapes, and so much more. The classroom erupted again, but this time, it wasn't in fear or shock. It was in eager curiosity. A seemingly unending deluge of questions which Avarice eventually, unfortunately, had to cut off as the lesson was coming to its end. I think that's enough for today. I want you all to think about what you've learnt. Because tomorrow, we'll be discussing something even stranger. She gave a playful smirk. The way humans treat each other. And that got the room buzzing again. The galactic conclave buzzed, a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and modulated hums. Delegates from across the galaxy gathered in the colossal chamber, ostensibly to maintain interstellar peace. In reality, it was a theater of posturing and thinly veiled threats. Earth's ambassador, Elias Vance, stood at the podium, his youthful face a mask of weary determination. He thinks of Elysium, the vibrant, hopeful colony world. It was part of the disputed territory, a system both Earth and the Krill hegemony claimed, tensions simmering for decades. He pictures the double sunset painting the alien landscape in hues of orange and violet. He remembers the message he received from his sister just weeks before, full of excitement about a new species of bioluminescent fungi she had discovered in the twilight of the double sunset. He had promised her he would visit soon to see the alien beauty for himself. For cycles, we have petitioned this body, Vance's voice echoed. The Krill hegemony has engaged in acts of aggression against Earth's colonies, specifically regarding Elysium, a world within the contested zone. We have presented evidence of unprovoked attacks, violations of established trade routes, and blatant disregard for interstellar law. A ripple of murmurs spread through the assembly. The Krill were notorious bullies, their expansionist ambitions matched only by their arrogance. Earth, by contrast, was a relative newcomer, a species known primarily for its trading outposts scattered along the galactic rim and its ubiquitous scientists. Human researchers could be found on nearly every world, delving into every conceivable field of study. They charted asteroid fields with unparalleled precision, deciphered the complex languages of sentient gas clouds, and even attempted to unravel the mysteries of dark matter. And, perhaps most notably, they possessed an unparalleled understanding of stellar dynamics, a field most other species considered too theoretical to be of practical value. They built massive orbital observatories, meticulously cataloging the life cycles of stars, from the fiery birth of protostars to the slow, agonizing death of red giants. The Krill representative, a hulking, kittenous being named Vorlag, shifted impatiently. "These are mere border skirmishes," Vorlag's translator boomed. "Minor disputes over resource rights. The humans exaggerate." Vance ignored him. "We understand your reluctance to intervene," he continued, addressing the conclave. "The Krill possess a formidable military, but our resolve is firm. We won't bow down to bullies, and it's well past time we stood up to them." An aide approached Vance, whispering urgently in his ear. Vance's face paled. He excused himself, muttering about needing to consult with his government. The hall watched him leave, a mix of pity and apprehension in their alien eyes. The Krill representative smirked, confident in his species' dominance. As Vance left, he felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He knew with a sickening certainty that the news was bad. Elysium was gone. The Krill had unleashed a devastating atmospheric toxin, rendering the planet uninhabitable in a matter of hours. 200 million colonists, men, women, and children, had perished. The attack was swift, brutal, and utterly without mercy. News feeds across the galaxy showed images of the poisoned skies, the silent cities, and the lifeless fields. The conclave was shocked, the silence broken only by hushed whispers. The Gornian delegate, a species known for its stoicism, visibly trembled, but fear held them in check. No one dared to openly condemn the Krill. During the 3 days that followed, Vance wrestled with his conscience. He saw the faces of the dead, heard the echoes of his sister's laughter. He knew that retaliation was necessary, but the scale of what he was contemplating weighed heavily on him. He consulted with Earth's Leaders, scientists, and ethicists. The decision was agonizing, but ultimately it was made. Humanity would respond. 3 days later, Vance returned. The weariness was gone, replaced by a chilling composure. He stepped onto the podium, his gaze sweeping across the conclave. "I came before you begging for assistance," Vance began, his voice resonating with a quiet sorrow. "I pleaded for your intervention, not because we lacked the means to defend ourselves, but because we did not want to resort to what I am about to describe. You left us no choice." He activated a holographic display, showing a star system bathed in the crimson light of a red dwarf. "This is Xantis Prime, one of the Krill's core colonies. It is home to over 3 billion Krill citizens." He paused, letting the image sink in. "We have deployed a weapon, not a bomb, not a missile, something far more insidious. We call it the Stellar Accelerator." The display zoomed in on the star. "It is a device injected into the star which manipulates its life cycle. We have the technology to nudge a star along its natural path, a technology born from decades of meticulous observation and theoretical modeling. In approximately 150 Earth years, Xantis Prime will become uninhabitable. Some 60 years after that, its sun will expand and engulf the planet." Stunned silence. Then Vorlag exploded. "You dare threaten the hegemony?" he roared, his chitinous claws flexing. A flicker of fear passed across his face, quickly masked by rage. "This is an act of war. We will crush you. We will—" Vance cut him off. "We are not threatening the hegemony. We are responding to the murder of 200 million humans. And while your military is far larger than ours, we struggled for a way to avenge our dead and still maintain our compassion, our mercy, our humanity. Moving that many people off of that planet will be a monumental task, even for an empire as large as yours." Vorlag recoiled slightly, a visible tremor running through his exoskeleton. He knew the rumors about the human obsession with stars, but he had dismissed them as eccentricities. Now he realized the terrifying truth. They had weaponized their knowledge. Vance continued. "Should you decide to continue hostilities, you should be aware that we have many of these devices, and we can set the timing on it to a much more aggressive timetable, one that would cost you billions of lives. The killing can end today. It's up to you." Vance met Vorlag's enraged gaze, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "This is the grace of humanity. We do not seek annihilation. We seek only to be left in peace. But if you threaten our existence, we will ensure that you face consequences that will change the course of your civilization. Consider this a warning." Vance deactivated the display and stepped away from the podium, leaving the conclave in stunned silence. Vorlag stared after him, his body trembling, a chilling realization dawning on him. The humans were not afraid to use their knowledge to inflict a slow, agonizing wound. In the cycles that followed, the Galactic Conclave became surprisingly receptive to Earth's requests for assistance. The Krill, facing the daunting prospect of relocating billions of citizens, found their expansionist ambitions curtailed. Humanity's actions, while controversial, sparked a galaxy-wide debate about the ethics of retaliation and the limits of acceptable warfare. Some hailed them as saviors, others condemned them as monsters, but no one could deny that Earth had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy. And Elias Vance, haunted by the memory of Elysium and the weight of his decisions, knew that the grace of humanity came at a heavy price. He wondered if the bioluminescent fungi still glowed in the poisoned twilight of Elysium, a silent testament to a beauty lost, a beauty that had bloomed in a contested world. Enjoy next amazing story. The Peccaries invasion was going well. Nilika 3 was a small planet with big potential. Located right next to a major warp gate, it gave anyone who controlled it full power over one of the most important trade routes connecting the surrounding systems. Galactic powers like the Orion Trade Union or the Blue Band used this gate on an almost daily basis to move their trade ships across the galaxy, and countless minor factions like the Surtex or the Humans were even more reliant on it. Controlling this warp gate would significantly boost the Peccary's influence and power. Right. Now the warp gate of Nilika 3 belonged to the Akri, but that would change soon. The only reason why the Akri hadn't been fully crushed yet was because the Peccary required the planet intact, forcing them to rely on less destructive weaponry. But in the end, the Akri resistance still fell one by one, be it somewhat slower, than if they were to use their full might. Peccary Commander Twix watched the capital city from the safety of her command ship, currently hovering in the atmosphere within visual range of the capital, but outside of the active combat zone. As an avian species, they prided themselves on their aviation technology, and almost every ship could fluidly transition from space to atmospheric flight and back. Their ships were some of the best in the galaxy and nearly impossible to shoot down. It was due to this that she watched with disdain as their fighters struggled to penetrate the air defense around the capital. "Why has our offensive slowed down?" Twix demanded to know. "Every other city until now folded like wet towels. Why isn't the same happening to the capital?" Her subordinates exchanged nervous glances, but eventually one of them spoke up from behind his monitor. "They're using a different type of air defense, Commander. Unlike the other cities, they aren't using Akri flak guns, but the newest generation, SAM turrets. Our scanners suggest human design, and both decoys and flares struggle to shake them off. We lost multiple fighters already and can't get close enough for precision strikes." Commander Twix frowned, clacking her beak. "Human? Excellent. Marksman, but extremely fragile. I remember fighting them before. Are they trading with the Akri?" She had always respected the humans to some degree. Sure, they were nowhere near as mighty as the Peccary, but they knew how to fight. The fact that they made deals with the Akri, however, made her lose a good chunk of that respect. Any species that knew their worth didn't trade with the lesser. Trading one of your most powerful technologies for those uncivilized, useless power armor? How disgraceful. Affirmative. They have an alliance, and the Akri traded multiple sets of their famous power armor, custom redesigned to fit human biology. In exchange for these turrets, even the blueprints were exchanged. "I'm not interested in economics. Tell me about these turrets. How do we take them out?" Twix snapped, glaring at the Peccary in question. He flinched, quickly pulling up some documents. On his monitor, "Humans are pioneers in ranged combat technology. I'm sorry, Commander, but taking those turrets out from a distance is nearly impossible. They outrange our guns and can shoot down any missiles. Our only options are a ground offensive or bombing them." Commander Twix didn't reply. From her previous experience with human technology, she had feared this would be the case. It could be worse, however. There were no humans present, and the Akri would be nowhere near as efficient with these weapons. "Bombing is not an option. We need that city intact. Get the ground troops ready." This was a suboptimal condition. The Akri fought quite differently from the Peccary, and their army was heavily landbound. Rather than relying on elegant weapons, they used their natural ones. Not even blades expanded their arsenal. Instead, they used exosuits, aka power armor, as they called it, to enhance their natural abilities to better rip their enemies apart with teeth and claws. Trix scoffed. Pathetic beasts. She was surprised these ferals had even managed to reach the stars. The Peccary were a lot more civilized. The warp gate would be in much more capable talons with them compared to the previous owners. Landing the flagship outside of the capital, about 5,000 ground troops were deployed, as well as about 500 hover tanks. They had evolved past primitive technologies like wheels or tracks, and armor was now partly airborne, another testament to the Peccary's superiority. They would be splitting into 5 groups and attacking from all sides. The SAM turrets were positioned more towards the outside of the capital, not too far behind the city walls. Taking them out would be a cakewalk. The walls had proven no barrier for their hover tanks, which could simply float over them, and the infantry had even fewer problems as Peccary could naturally fly. The Akri had obviously tried to stop them, but Trix had ensured they would have the numerical advantage. While the Akri were strong in ground combat, they were heavily outnumbered, and even their barbaric tactics couldn't help them anymore. Trix scoffed in disbelief as she inspected the corpse of a fellow Peccary. Their throat and belly had been cleanly sliced open by sharp claws, ending their lives in seconds. Akri were monsters if they enjoyed killing their enemies in such bloody ways. They even looked a lot more like bloodthirsty predators rather than a civilized species. A mouth full of fangs and claws on their hands and feet, nobody would blame you for mistaking an Akri for some dinosaur. Nevertheless, they were doing well. The Akri had barely managed to kill a handful of them, unable to get close enough to land these killing blows. The Peccary simply had the more advanced weapons, the newest generation arc throwers, lethal weapons that fired streams of pure electricity. Any Akri that got too close would spend their last few moments screaming in agony as the arc throwers send millions of volt trough them. You barely needed to aim. Modern arc throwers found their target on their own, and it was a completely bloodless affair, spilling no blood. As they made their way through the streets, aiming for the last SAM turret, Trix noticed movement behind her. An Akri in what she assumed to be a light power armor had clamped its jaws around the back of one of its downed comrades' necks, carefully dragging them into a nearby building. The mark on their side identified them as a medic, and Trix scoffed in disgust. Grabbed like a predator dragging off a piece of meat, a Peccary would have used a stretcher like a civilized being. Pointing her weapon, she fired, and the Akri shrieked in agony as blue arcs of electricity ran up and down their body. Their muscles forcefully contracted and blood gushed out from between their jaws as their teeth involuntarily clamped down. The medic was still alive when she ceased firing, but had no eyes for her. Instead, they stared at their now dead patient. In disbelief and shock, a desperate whine escaping their blood-covered mouth, the blood of a fellow Akri. Despair turned into pain as Trix fired again to finish them off. It took a moment. Arc throwers weren't exactly the fastest killing weapons, but it was still a lot more civilized than slicing someone's throat, and not a single drop of blood was spilled. Boom. The battlefield turned silent, and everyone looked. Up in surprise when a Peccary carrier exploded into a ball of flames, the debris raining down on the battlefield below. That wasn't the only thing that came down from the heavens, however, as multiple gunships descended towards the ship below and started engaging the Peccary fighters. Impossible! They had crushed the Akri Air Force weeks ago. How could they... Wait, those weren't Akri fighters. The silence was broken by an Akri. The humans! They have received our distress call. Another faction? A string of rather uncivilized curses escaped Trix's mouth before she could stop herself. Having a Thirth Party meddle into this conquest was the last thing they needed. They had been so close to taking the planet. Now everything was uncertain and descending into chaos. She scolded herself. She had battled humans before. She knew how to take them, what their weaknesses were. This was just a setback. Victory was still achievable. Humans might have outstanding aim, but they were wimps, having bodies that snapped like twigs under pressure. If it weren't for the lethality of their weapons, nobody would take them seriously. She grabbed her communicator and set it to transmit to all troops. Cover the high grounds and surround any potential drop-off zones. Humans are glass cannons. They die easily once you hit them. Just don't give them a chance to shoot. They hit hard. The Peccary forces sprang into action like a well-oiled machine, adapting to the new threat. A squad of soldiers surrounded her, personal guards responsible for her protection now that things got heated. Commander, how large are humans exactly? One of the guards suddenly asked. Their pathetic size barely reaches 2 meters in height. You're supposed to know that, soldier. Commander Trix snapped back, annoyed by the distraction. If that's the case, then what in the stars is that? The distress in their tone got her attention, and she followed his gaze towards a group of dropships that had gotten past their fighters, quickly approaching the city. Those weren't the source of the soldiers' distress, however, but rather the things attached below them. Giants. Commander Trix couldn't believe her eyes when one of these giants, easily 2-3 times larger than what a human was supposed to be, detached from the dropship and crashed down on top of a hover tank, reducing it to scrap metal. Only as it climbed down from the wreckage, completely unharmed, did she get a better look at it, and as she started to understand what she was looking at, her uneasiness was replaced by fear. A machine. A giant exosuit had been dropped off by the dropship, and it was merely the first of many. This was impossible. Humans were wimps, fragile glass cannons. Their soldiers wore cloth uniforms with metal plates attached to them rather than proper armor. Where in the stars did they get fully functional mechs from? She didn't get time to question it further, as the exosuit opened fire on them with the 2 Gatling guns that it had instead of arms. A few peccary tried to attack it with their arc throwers, but the electric arcs harmlessly fizzled along the outer plates, down the legs, being reabsorbed by the ground without hitting any vital systems. Or the pilot of the mech. "Hover tanks, engage those exosuits!" Commander Trix desperately screamed into her communicator, and much to her relief, the heavily armored vehicles obeyed without hesitation. With loud roars, a missile was sent on its way, highly advanced self-propelled weapon systems with a payload that could take out any armor, and a guiding system that was difficult to fool. These missiles were pinnacle of peccary weapon technology. Countless years, credits and mines had been invested into them. The exosuit noticed as well and opened fire. At first, she assumed it was trying to take out the tank, to pull its killer, alongside itself into the grave, but when she noticed that it wasn't targeting the tank but the missile. No, it couldn't. It wouldn't. It was the pinnacle of their technology. There was no way. Boom! Trix flinched as the shockwave ruffled her feathers, and much to her horror, the exosuit was still standing. Millions of not billions of credits worth of research taken, out by an overclocked chemical slug thrower. More exosuits dropped in around them, and the sky was starting to show less and less peccary ships. Everywhere she looked, her troops were falling, and soon enough the first hover tank went down as well. Then, just when she didn't think it could get worse, one of the exosuits turned to face her. Her wings shook in stress as she opened fire, a continuous stream of pure electricity lighting up between her and the exosuit, but it didn't stop, didn't even slow down. The arc thrower was completely useless. The exosuit, meanwhile, didn't even bother to shoot her, simply swiping at her with its arm. The side of the Gatling gun painfully hit her in the side. Something, presumably her wing, broke, and her weapon was sent flying. She landed painfully on her back. She groaned, but managed to slowly right herself back up. If she was going to die, she was going to die standing, staring down her enemies, rather than with her beak in the dirt. The exosuit stomped past her, surprising her and the Acri equally. "Aren't you going to finish her off?" one of the Acri soldiers asked in stunned disbelief. The machine paused and turned towards the Acri, giving Trix a chance to compare the exosuit to the Acri power armor, finding a surprising amount of similarities. Acri power armor. The human had turned the power armor of those uncivilized ferals into giant, heavily armed mechs. She started to realize that the trade deal the humans had made with the Acri was nowhere near as stupid as she thought it had been. The exosuit looked back at Commander Trix before turning away. "Nah, I want to go fight another tank. She's all yours." With those words, the human left, leaving the downed peccary to her doom as the Acri closed in on her. If you see any grammar mistakes or plot holes, I kindly ask you to ignore them. If you don't feel like ignoring grammar mistakes, post them below to prove your superiority over my grammar fix bot. If you don't feel like ignoring plot holes, also post them below, since it's never too early to feel like a derp. Thanks for reading my story. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.